Tonight, we are going to talk about something the ancient Egyptians never hid behind closed doors. What did they understand about intimacy that most of us have forgotten? Why did their gods create the universe through desire, and why wasn't anyone embarrassed about it? And here's a question you probably didn't expect. Why did they offer lettuce to their gods as a symbol of romance? Before we step back 4,000 years, here's a small request. If you love history that's honest, curious, and a little unexpected, please subscribe to Little Historical and give this video a like. It helps new creators like me keep telling these stories. Now, take a deep breath. Let the Nile carry you back. And let's uncover the truth about sex in ancient Egypt. And that changes how we see everything that follows. Because if the gods themselves could be so unashamed, what did that mean for the ordinary farmer, the village potter, the woman weaving linen by the Nile? The answer might surprise you more than any divine myth. In ancient Egypt, getting married required no priest, no contract, no white dress, and certainly no awkward family speeches. Two people simply decided to share a home, a bed, and a bread oven. And just like that, society considered them husband and wife. Can you imagine the intimacy of that simplicity? No ceremony to hide behind. Just a quiet, private agreement between two people who looked at each other and said, "Yes, we choose this." But don't mistake informality for coldness. The Egyptians poured their hearts into love notes scribbled on broken pottery, what we might call ancient text messages. One reads, "I will lie down at home and pretend to be sick. Then you will come to see me, and if you come near me, I will get better." Another whispers, "My heart races when I see you coming from the fields. I cannot grind grain. I cannot bake bread. I can only think of your voice." These aren't distant, stiff inscriptions. They are human, warm, and achingly tender. And here is where the tension rises. Because in a society without wedding ceremonies, what kept two people together? Not laws, not religious decrees. Something far more fragile and powerful, reputation. A woman could own property, initiate divorce, and take her husband to court. If he strayed with another married woman, the consequences could be brutal, not because the state cared, but because the other husband might not be forgiving. Jealousy, it turns out, has always been eternal. Yet a married man with an unmarried woman? Mostly shrugged off. That imbalance creates a quiet, simmering drama beneath the surface of every village. Women knew. Men knew. And everyone pretended not to notice. The Egyptians relied on gossip, sidelong glances, and the occasional passive-aggressive song to keep order. It worked about as well as you'd expect. So as we move from the gods to the bedroom, and from the bedroom to the afterlife, remember this. The Egyptians understood that love isn't found in grand gestures. It lives in the small, secret moments, the touch of a hand across a dinner bowl, the whispered promise after the children are asleep. And that is where our story deepens next. Tonight, we begin with the gods, because in ancient Egypt, the divine didn't just watch from the heavens. They touched, they desired, and they created the world through acts that would make most modern mythologies look away. Let's start with Adam, the original owner. According to the Heliopolitan creation story, Adam stood alone in the endless watery darkness of none. No partner, no divine matchmaker, just himself and an unimaginable need to bring order out of chaos. So what did he do? The texts are surprisingly frank. He engaged in an act of solitary creation, using his own hand to generate the first divine pair, Shu and Tefnut. The Egyptians didn't flinch at this. They didn't hide it behind poetic euphemisms. They carved it into temple walls and recited it as sacred liturgy. Because for them, desire wasn't a fall from grace. It was the original spark of existence. Can you feel the weight of that? A universe born not from a command, but from an intimate, almost vulnerable act of self-giving. That changes everything about how we understand their culture. Then there is the story that still haunts the imagination, Osiris and Isis. After Osiris was murdered and dismembered by his jealous brother Set, his loyal wife Isis searched the Nile for every piece of her beloved. She found almost all of them, but one crucial part was missing, swallowed by a fish. Most cultures would have called that the end. Not Isis. She crafted a replacement phallus out of gold and magic, revived Osiris just long enough to lie with him, and conceived their son Horus. Think about the intimacy of that moment. A dead god, a grieving goddess, and a single night of resurrection through love. The Egyptians didn't see this as grotesque. They saw it as the ultimate proof that sexuality is life itself, even beyond death. And then there is Minute, the god of fertility, standing eternally at attention in temple reliefs. His statues are unmistakable. One hand holds a flail, the other is raised, and his body leaves nothing to the imagination. Priests offered him lettuce, not because it was a vegetable, but because its upright stalk and milky white sap symbolized exactly what you think. At Min's festivals, people danced, drank, and celebrated the raw power of generation. No shame. No whispered jokes. Just reverence for the force that made the Nile rise and the crops grow. So as we move from the gods to the people, remember, in Egypt, the sacred and the sensual were never enemies. They were lovers. And that changes how we see everything that follows. And that is where our story deepens next. Because after the whispered promises and the shared bed, another question always followed in the darkness. What if a child did not come? Or worse, what if one arrived at the wrong time? The Egyptians, for all their openness about desire, were also fiercely practical. They understood that intimacy carried consequences, and they refused to leave those consequences to chance or the gods alone. So they invented methods that blur the line between medicine and magic, and some of them might make you wince. Imagine a woman preparing a mixture of crocodile dung, honey, and sourdough. She shapes it into a small pessary and inserts it before lying with her husband. The idea was not madness. The dung created a physical barrier, while the honey and fermented dough produced an acidic environment that might have actually slowed sperm. Did it work? Perhaps not reliably, but the fact that they tried tells us something profound. Egyptian women had agency over their own bodies. They were not passive vessels. They were active participants in deciding when life would begin. And then there was the more elegant solution, acacia gum. Modern science has confirmed that acacia ferments into lactic acid, a natural spermicide. 3,500 years ago, Egyptian healers had already written down the recipe. They didn't know why it worked. They only knew that it did. But what if a child was wanted, desperately? Fertility became a battlefield. Women wore amulets of the dwarf god Biz, whose grotesque face and leonine manner scared away evil spirits while guarding the bedroom. They slept with clay figurines of the hippopotamus goddess Taurit, whose heavy breasts and pregnant belly symbolized safe conception and childbirth. And if pregnancy still did not happen, there were rituals that make modern couples seem shy. A woman might drink a concoction of ground dates, honey, and the blood of a black donkey, then lie on a rooftop under the full moon, murmuring spells to Hathor, the goddess of love and drunken joy. The tension in those moments must have been unbearable. Each month that passed without news was a small death. Each hopeful sign a resurrection. The Egyptians also had a surprisingly accurate pregnancy test. A woman would urinate on 2 bags, one filled with barley, the other with emmer wheat. If barley sprouted, it was a boy. If emmer, a girl. If neither sprouted, she was not pregnant. Modern studies have shown this method works about 70% of the time, because pregnant urine contains estrogen that promotes seed growth. They had no microscopes, no laboratories, but they had centuries of observation and an unflinching willingness to touch, to test, to try. So as we move from the secrets of conception to the mysteries of what came after death, hold on to this thought. The Egyptians did not separate the body from the soul, nor desire from devotion. And in the afterlife, they believed, the bed was not empty. That is where we journey next. That is where we journey next. Because the Egyptians did not believe that death silenced desire. In fact, they prepared for the afterlife with the same attention to intimacy that they gave to the living world. Imagine crossing into the field of reeds, a perfect mirror of earthly life, where the Nile still flows, the barley still ripens, and the arms of your beloved still wait to hold you. The dead did not become angels or ghosts. They became transfigured spirits, but spirits with bodies. Whole bodies. Functional bodies. And the tomb inscriptions make this startlingly clear. The deceased prayed to the gods to restore every limb, every organ, and every capacity for pleasure. Not metaphorically. Literally. Consider the myth that haunted every funeral. Osiris, the god of the dead, was dismembered and then lovingly reassembled by his wife Isis. But one part was missing, so she crafted a replacement, revived him, and conceived their son Horus. That story was not just theology. It was a promise. If Osiris could experience intimacy after death, then so could you. Coffin texts from the Middle Kingdom include spells specifically designed to revivify the loins of the deceased. Other spells protect the tomb from anyone who might disturb the couple's eternal privacy. The message is unmistakable. Love does not end at the grave. It only changes address. And here is where the tension deepens. The Egyptians built their tombs as eternal houses. Husband and wife were often buried together, their mummies lying side by side in shared chambers. Wall paintings show them embracing, touching, facing one another in poses that are tender, not merely ceremonial. Some tombs even include false doors, spiritual portals through which the soul could return to enjoy offerings of food, drink, and incense, but also, perhaps, to steal a moment with the one they left behind. The priests who performed the opening of the mouth ceremony did more than restore the ability to breathe and eat. They restored the ability to feel. What must it have been like for a widow, knowing that her husband's Ka, his spiritual double, still lingered near the tomb entrance at night? What did she whisper when she brought fresh bread and beer to his chapel? The records do not say, but the silence is louder than any text. The Egyptians did not fear that desire would fade. They feared it would be forgotten. So they carved erotic scenes into the very stone that held their bones. They wrote love spells on papyrus buried with the dead. They packed tombs with amulets of fertility, miniature phalli, and figurines of lovers embracing. Not for this life. For the next one. Because in Egypt, even eternity had room for a shared bed. And as we draw this journey to a close, remember, they did not see the afterlife as a reward for renunciation. They saw it as a continuation of everything that made life worth living. And that changes how we understand not just their death, but their love.